Hi everyone. Thanks everyone for joining today. It is really good to see such a mix of people here because AS4 is one of those topics where different teams are curious for very different reasons. So some come from a security angle, some from integration pain, some because their partners are pushing them, and some because they know the old way is starting to bend under pressure. So before we start, just a quick reminder, we are recording this session and toward the end, we will have a dedicated time to question and answer. And if anything drops on the tech side, just feel free to jump back in. Now, I'm not alone today. I have two experts who live and breathe this space far more intensely than I do. Let's welcome Ashwin, who leads EDI solution at AIT Worldwide Logistics, and Raj, Senior Technology Architect at Divine. So,
Hello.
before we get into technical pieces, I want to say this upfront. AS4 is not something we discuss because it is shiny. We discuss it because the world around EDI has changed faster than the most teams expected. And I'm really glad to have Ashwin and Raj with me because the three of us have seen very different sides of that change. So, Ashwin, I remember you mentioned something recently that stuck with me. You said AS4 solves problem people do not even realize are solvable. That really made me think. Ashwin, you are in mute.
I'm sorry. Currently, most of the team have lived with, are facing the AS2 failures, and what we are facing, the challenge is the visibility to the messages or the transactions. So when we have this AS2, AS4 enters the picture of the transaction or messaging within the trading partners, it becomes more it's becoming more predictable to for companies like us, which are which are more facing these challenges. So
Yeah, and to add to that, so when we are troubleshooting communication issues, right, with the customers, I mean, because of this legacy protocols, it takes a long time to debug and zero in on the error. But then actually they don't care for the protocol, right? But all these problems could go away if we only had AS4.
Exactly, which is why today is not about walking through a spec sheet. It is about understanding day-to-day realities this protocol quietly improves. So, so let us ground ourselves. When people first hear AS4, what do you think is simplest way to describe what it brings?
to me, it is the more than the protocol. Currently, the way we have it is every enterprise uses like technology in a different way. Like meaning, the some companies have the EDI or the communication on cloud. Some use API. Some use the hybrid system. Where the AS4 fits is like where the AS4 fits into all of these enterprises, like different technologies. Currently, the drawback or the challenge is when you have an AS2, you need to have a specific connection, meaning we are unsure whether the cloud technology the partner is using, does it work on AS2 or not? But the AS4 resolves that issue for us.
Raj, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, speaking from a visibility perspective, right? So visibility is quite important, right? Both for the developers and also the business users, right? So some of these legacy protocols, they just transmit the file and then they go silent, okay? I mean, if the file is successful, no issues. But if there is a problem, communication failure, or the other side, the party says that we didn't receive the file, then where the problem arises, right? How to troubleshoot it, where is the problem, zeroing on the problem. So some of these legacy protocols do not have are not quite good with the visibility, but AS4 resolves those issues. So it's quite meta-rich, and it gives you a chain of events. So it comes in very handy to troubleshoot communication issues, and also visibility for the business users.
Yeah. So, and I like both of these because they are simple and human. Most of the people here do not want jargon, they want clarity. So, um, yeah. So I want us to pause here and to better explain what AS4 actually solves. Let's bring in some real-time examples.
Okay, so there was this, I can recollect a case where we keep sending these EDI invoices to a particular customer, but some of them are lost, right, in the transition, or so they come back to us saying that so and so invoices are missing. Actually, they contact business, and then business comes to us because the EDI is the one that's transmitting, right? So with the legacy protocols, we do have these simple receipts, but they're not good enough, right? And most of the time, we go through these logs which are not which are ambiguous, right? And then we provide these logs and screenshots saying that we transmitted the file. The other side might say no, and then it goes back and forth. But when it comes to AS4 receipts, right, they are quite rich actually. So it is irrefutable evidence actually. There's no more room for any guesswork. So it helps us a lot, finding where exactly the problem is and then resolving it quickly, so that transmission guys go on smoothly.
So in simple terms, AS4 removes uncertainty, and in operations, uncertainty is real cost center. Um, of course, you want to add
No,
to
I mean,
this?
I just wanted to I wanted to add that to your point as like the challenge that we face with the AS2 is the certificate generation. So I just wanted to add that point. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, of course, modernization isn't painless. Organization hesitate not because AS4 is unclear, but because the journey feels overwhelming. I mean, what typically slows teams down, in your point of view?
The onboarding process is the right now what we face with the AS2. We are like a top 25 logistic company within the Chicago area. So the biggest challenge that we are facing is the onboarding of AS2. So right from adding like a security layer, then generating a certificate, then as I was mentioning, the certificate could be generated in a different ways. And but the partner is looking for a certificate that has been generated specifically through like it's an whether it is an AIT internal or there are some agencies that generate this certificate, and again it needs to be a certificate format like a PFX or CER. So all these add up to the time on onboarding. So every integration is different, and every communication is different, even though it's AS2, which is supposed to be universal. It's a different one. So what AS4 helps us is to drop down that onboarding from like weeks to days, and then because it has a built-in messaging and the transaction level security, we cover basically every aspect of the communication there. So.
Mhm. So the challenge is not difficult, it's unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity disappears with the right approach. So let's zoom out.
It's
So zoom out for a moment, and because what is happening in EDI world right now is not subtle. The landscape has shifted faster in the last 2 years than in the last decade. Attacks have doubled, regulations are tightening, partners are modernizing whether you are ready or not. So let me ask both of you this. When you look at the environment we are operating in, what is the one thing teams still do not grasp?
Yeah, for me,
Jimmy.
I think It's the external pressure. So, I mean, organizations, right, when they have a stable system, they do not want to, modernize. So, but then there is this external pressure from, regulators or some influential partners. Okay, so they are forcing you into adopting more clarity, structure, and also stronger security. So that's when you are also sort of pushed to do modernization of your EDI system. And the current legacy EDI systems are simply not good enough for that. So AS4 is a modern one, and then it could, give you that edge.
So, Ashwin, you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, it as the technological cycles like have shortened dramatically. So let me give you an instance. We had one partner that came in, said we are onboarding we got a request to onboard a new customer, and the partner who was going to onboard an AS2 with us wanted only the secured HTTP, meaning they cannot function on the unsecured HTTP. So that's where we ran into challenge. So we needed to onboard that particular. We had to enable the port, enable all kinds of network infrastructure that is required for that communication to be successful. So, but what AS4 does is like right now it eliminates the legacy transports. It can be used within the different layers of the within the cloud, like within the API, whether the hybrid. It can help us onboard these pretty fast, and with the it'll remove the delays. It'll scale the there's a like we can scale this to at a higher level, and then we can reduce the constant like operational noise, meaning whether, as Raj was mentioning, whether we received the message or we did not receive it. Here we have like a transaction level and a message level validation.
So the ecosystem is evolving faster than the infrastructure connecting to it. This mismatch becomes risk, and risk, when ignored long enough, becomes a cost. So let's bring this closer to the enterprise level. Organizations are revisiting EDI not because they are enthusiastic about new protocols, but because their current systems are starting to slow down business performance. What are the practical triggers that finally push teams to rethink EDI?
To me, the volume of just to give you a little like a background at AIT, we transfer about like a 60,000 to 70,000 message. So for me, that's the volume. So as the volume keeps growing, as the and the tolerance level and of the business, I would say, and across the teams, is like once it goes beyond, and what you do is you dedicate more time towards how to handle this volume, how to mitigate if issue comes in, like it's a proportionate. Like if an issue rises for this volume, and as the volume increases, your issue will rise like those many X number of times with that. So what we had was one of the partner that like last month had changed his certificate, and there was little when we started communicating it. And I mean, when I say communicate, I mean when we started to send the transactions, it started like a failing because the protocol on their side was changed. So all these like add up to the time and then the cost, and then they're dealing with these issues. The dealing or the issues will be dealt with different way when we have it with the four on AS4.
Raj, would you like to add something? What
Yeah, I
Ashwin
would
said.
like to add something on the security side. So security is key because in B2B transactions, right? So there is this, these are like critical business transactions coming, originating from one organization and going into another organization through internet. So security is the most important function here. And as we keep going, right, so these modern security requirements, they really outgrow the legacy or traditional protocols very fast. And the threats have, become more and more sophisticated. So data loss, data threat is real actually. So earlier, whatever security we had in place, right? It's no, I mean, it keep that its threats are changing, right? So they become no longer defensible. So that is when we need to be focusing on message level protection, stronger receipts, standard encryption. Okay, and also these are not like basic. These are not like advanced features anymore. They are like basic, very basic expectations between organizations in transmitting
Mhm.
business transactions, and we should not take a chance and just leave ourselves exposed to these security threats, right? So it is important that organizations act fast to keep the security in place so that it doesn't happen, the security breach doesn't happen. Otherwise, they will be badly exposed to security threats.
So, and it's interesting how the triggers are rarely technical. They are about business velocity, slow
Yes.
partner onboarding, repeated error cycles, if difficulty scaling. These directly affect competitive positions. So now, one question always comes up at this point: what really changes if we move from AS2 to AS4? Not the table comparison, but the real differences enterprises feel. So, Raj, how do you usually explain this in a way that leaders can connect to?
Okay. So put it in simplest terms, right? So as I was mentioning earlier, so AS2 or other traditional protocols, they transmit a file or a message and then they go silent, right? But AS4 doesn't stop there. It sends messages with proof, context, integrity, and transparency. Okay. So with AS2, when the transmission is failed, right? So you'll have to reproduce the error to do the debugging. Okay, find where the problem is. But with AS4, you have this logs, very clear logs, chain of events that will help a technical person to exactly find out the problem. Okay, so days could be saved in troubleshooting. And also with AS4, it's not just a simple transfer of file. It's like a conversation between the sender and the recipient, and then back to the sender.
Mhm. So, Ashwin, would you like to add something to Raj's point?
Yeah, I'll just add, as Raj mentioned, the AS2 was designed more for file transfers, basically. It's an equivalent of like if you have an FTP or SFTP, the AS2 was just an alternate method of sending that file. But as the technology is evolving, we are going towards more like a web services. We are going towards more like a messaging engine where there's more visibility to that to whether a successful transmission of the message or like a failure of the message. Right now, it's like everything is a black box. The moment you transmit the file, until the partner he'll send an MDN, but that MDN is like unreadable. It doesn't tell you whether that message got processed across. So as our ecosystem is growing today, the AS2 was never designed for that. So we need the AS4, which gives the more like a security layer that, as Raj was mentioning, that, and then it gives a more visibility to the not only to the payloads and within the payloads at each message that was sent in the payloads. So it gives us a lot of visibility, and basically that boils down to like a time and money saving. So
So, yeah, thank you, Ashwin. So, what I appreciate about both explanation is how they move the discussion beyond features. The real difference is that AS4 reduces ambiguity. Lower ambiguity means better governance, better partner trust, and better decision making. So, Let's be honest, no modernization journey is smooth, and AS4 migration has its own traps that teams walk into unintentionally. Ashwin, what are the pitfalls you see most organizations stumble over?
The pitfall, as I mentioned, one of them, the certificate exchange is the biggest one. I mean, um, every partner, every company uses the certificate generator from different organization. So you have to be compatible to that. If you're not compatible to that, the bottom line is you're going to lose the business. So what we need to what AS4 does is that it removes that particular biggest hurdle if the certificate signature is not right, if the encryption is not right. So all these will cause the business to not go further. So it exposes like a lot of uh, I would say inabilities within that AS2.
Mhm. Raj?
Yeah, for me, the rushed testing is the second major trap, right? So often in projects, when development overruns its schedule, right? So the testing sort of rush through so as to meet the project deadlines, right? So things that are working in production or QA, I mean, in QA or testing environment, right, might not work exactly the same in production environment. So you need to be prepared to do like deep scenario testing, and you may, if you think that you can save some time by rushing through the testing, it's not that you're saving effort. Actually, you're postponing the problems to the production environment, right? And with AS4, right? So you have everything in place already. It's so reliable that it speaks the truth all the time. Okay, so there is very limited chance for it to fail in production once you have tested in QA successfully.
Mhm. And what I take from both of your point is this AS4 doesn't fall silently, it falls loud and clearly. So that is a gift long term if the team is prepared for the discipline it demands in the beginning. Now moving from pitfall to precision, because AS4 is all about precision. So there are certain configuration decisions that determine whether your AS4 implementations becomes a strategic asset or a recurring headache. Raj, where do you see that the highest impact is?
Yeah, so as we were talking about earlier, right? So security is the key here. So it sets the foundation for everything else, right? Signature algorithms, encryption mechanisms, trust boundaries. And if these are set up incorrectly, right, nothing else matters. In B2B transmission of business transactions, security is the most key. So in case the security policy is misconfigured, right? So then the teams will have to keep chasing the failures, right? They might look like application issues, but actually they are not. So time, like weeks, could be spent in just debugging these problems. That has nothing to do with the business logic. So security is quite key, and then AS4 can handle that quite well.
Ashwin, your points on this?
Um, right now, just today morning, I was working on one of the issues that we are facing with one of our carriers, and we are set up with AS2 with this carrier. So what happened was the carrier was receiving a lot of messages from different places. Like he has different integrations, so he's might be having 100 plus integrations or more. What it did is we're talking about the messaging part, right? As we speak about this, they had a threshold of receiving these messages. So that threshold got got limited, like meaning they reached the endpoint of that threshold of those messages. And after that, no messages were getting processed on their side. As Raj said, this is not like an application issue here. We are trying to send a message, but it is some other factor is causing the message to not go across. So, like the reliable messages, they sound minor, but they are at a bigger impact to building on like Raj's point, like what I mentioned just now, what we face the real world scenario today morning is the how to keep that message volume being like reliable and the message communication to be reliable. So they are like more they are of a higher importance other than as the volume increases. So uh, we we want that to be handled like an AS4. We want that to handle like more reliably, so it does not impact the business. So AS4 comes into this picture of like, since you have a two layer structure, you send a payload and then the message. So they go hand in hand. So that is that's a big plus point that AS4 brings it to the table.
Hmm. So those configurations aren't technical switches, they are architectural decisions. They determine rhythm, reliability, and how predictable your ecosystem feels after migrations. So we are going to move into a set of questions that usually come up when organizations start seriously considering AS4. These are not theoretical questions. These are the ones teams whisper internally because they know the answers are uncomfortable. So let me start off with something that leaders often feel but rarely articulate. When organizations remain on legacy EDI, the risks are not dramatic. They do not explode. They accumulate quietly, and quiet risks are usually the ones that shape long-term outcomes. So let me put this on the table for both of you. When you look at enterprise staying on AS2 or older transport, what risk do you see them counting to carry, perhaps without realizing it?
I'll cite the same example as of today morning that we faced. So it was ambiguity, and until we came to know, like via email, we are notified that they are not receiving these transactions. So it leads to ambiguity. So you're relying on an email from the external partner to tell that they have reached the message volume, and now you resend all of these messages. So assign a resource to trigger all of the data, resend all of those messages. So then again confirm via email saying that did the file reach? Okay, you didn't reach. I got. Did you get all the files? Did you get all the transactions? If not, then I need to go back and reprocess it until the queue clears and everyone is good on both the sides. So, and then the business will go on from there. And now they have all the data, all the business data that they have, all the transactions that they have. So and it leads to uncertainty basically.
Mm-hmm. Raj?
Yeah, so exactly, right? So as Ashwin was talking about earlier, so AS2 is a simple receipt actually. It's an MDN. But with AS4, right, the receipts is quite stronger. It's SOAP based, right? With those simple receipts, so what happens is that it is left to people's interpretation rather than the protocol. It depends on the person's expertise. So each person might interpret the transmission log differently. They'll have to cross-check the timestamp and then also manually piece together all that information and provide a proof, right? And most of the time it could be just a guesswork. And then what happens, there is back and forth and then there's this argument. So with AS4, it's the final truth. Okay, it's evidence based, right? So that there is no room for denying that. So that's where AS4 stands out. It provides an irrefutable evidence of file transmission.
Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting is that both of you are talking about something deeper than failure. You're talking about uncertainty. So uncertainty is what makes leader nervous because it weakens decision making, it removes confidence, and in complex supply chains, confidence is currency. So now this ties into something broader. The regulatory landscape is shifting faster than most enterprises, technology stacks, and customers, especially the large ecosystems, are often the fastest movers. So let me ask this in a grounded way. when organizations stay on legacy transports, how realistic is it for them to meet new compliance expectations or customer mandate?
I would say it's not very realistic because, as I was saying, the threats are getting more and more sophisticated, and then the legacy protocols are just not good enough to handle that, right? And then regulatory bodies are bringing in new regulations in terms of providing, trails of the file transmission. So the legacy protocols are not simply good enough to be able to provide you that, and they lack this non-reputation. That is, you cannot deny that. It's an evidence that anyone cannot deny. It's more like interpretation. So you cannot really retrofit, trust into that legacy system. You need a much more sophisticated protocol.
Ashwin?
We as at AIT, we deal with a lot of Fortune 100 companies, and they dictate the industry, they dictate the technology, because they are thinking at a different level. They want the business to be secure. They want the data to be data that is transmitting between us and them needs to be secured. It's the every aspect that they want to look at for avoid any data breach. So we are vulnerable to that data breach. So what AS4 brings to that is like a more secured layer. And once a customer moves to, say, for AS4, we need to be ready to migrate to that. So we have to be, we cannot fall back. I mean, if we fall back on our inability to move to AS4, so the ultimate hit would be losing businesses. So we even though we are in the technology, like a technology area, we go hand in hand with the business. So it is a little high risk, and when you are on AS2 and when you are not on AS4, or when you're not compatible to AS4, that's a high risk for organizations like us.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Ashwin. So, and that perception piece ties directly into the cost conversation, because the organizations that struggle most with the compliance are usually the ones spending the most time chasing issues. So when a message goes missing or arrives late, it disrupts the whole workflows. So how much capacity do you see teams losing just trying to keep things stable? Ashwin?
Like for an organization like us, and when you have like a planned activities here, so when you have the planned integrations, and when you have a moving business or like a very competitive business like in our industry, the timing, the resource, the cost are really like our biggest factor to keep the business going. So I'll take more on the business perspective, because I'll tell you the same example that we had today. I had to put like two resources. One was to communicate with the partner, another one was to retrigger the data. So it's like most of the organization are willing to admit you'd have some surprise element every day in your as the day starts. So we cannot explain this legacy failure right now, because we did not know that the message threshold went up, like they had consumed all the way through. We do not know their intricacies within their system. So these adds like a time. These add costs. So we call a policy of like a 110 100. 110 is you resolve the first time, or you resolve 10 times, and the 100th time when you resolve, it's basically a failure for us, because you have you dedicated your resource 100 times that to fix an integration issues.
Thank you, Ashwin. So Raj, would you like to add something to what Ashwin said?
Yeah, so also the real cost here, right? It's not the time spent in, troubleshooting the issue or resolving the single error, right? So as Ashwin was talking about, right? So he has to allocate two resources who could have been used elsewhere, right? So it's the overall slowdown in operations. You have to handle multiple teams. You have to get operations involved in troubleshooting. So another project that is parallelly on could get slowed down. Onboarding another customer could get slowed down, or even more work with this new customer could slow down, right? And then also this issue of satisfaction, customer satisfaction. So it's like a cascading effect, right? So this sort of firefighting, I think it cannot go on for long. So we need to have like a very robust, modern communication system in place.
Mhm. So the financial impact isn't just the harsh spending fixing errors, it's the momentum that the business loses because the team is stuck maintaining something that's already past its useful limit. One thing that always surfaces with the conversation with operations teams is how draining it is to figure out what actually happened when a message goes off the track. So a single failure can ripple through slipping, billing, forecasting, and before anyone can fix it, they first need to know where it broke. So how long does it usually take in legacy setup, like Raj?
It's actually longer than it should be, right? With these legacy systems, you don't get a clear starting point. Like also sometimes it could be very person dependent rather than protocol dependent, right? So, and then as I was saying earlier, there is these very generic logs or ambiguous logs that doesn't really pinpoint the exact issue, but then you'll have to interpret the log and then sort of like trial and error, you figure out what the problem is, right? And then you line up the events, right, based on the timestamp, and then you have to speak to your partner to check some of the things at their side. So there's a lot of back and forth, right? So it becomes like a kind of an investigation every single time this happens with this legacy systems. So trace and resolve does take painfully long with these legacy systems.
So that makes a huge difference because when teams spend less time solving the mystery, they spend more time solving the actual issue.
Right.
So something I hear from executive is that they feel in their integration layer doesn't match the pace of the rest this tech stack. So the business is moving to cloud, API are exploding, partners are expecting fast onboarding, but the EDI layer is still carrying assumptions from a decade ago. So can legacy transports actually support where organization want to go next? Ashwin?
I don't think so. So because the reason being, as the technology evolves, like it is going for towards the cloud and towards the API, towards the web services. So the legacy EDI, like AS2 or these, they were not designed for these. They were not designed to communicate directly via web services from like an AS4 communicating via the way AS4 can communicate using the web services on cloud premise. So the very fact that we need to have IP addresses added to both the systems to communicate, that tells me it's a legacy. It's a legacy technology. Right now, there are very like you do have an IP address. We don't use it for data communication. So where like that's where like the AWS comes into the picture, where we are where you have a AS4 uh, can be executed, can be built on AWS infrastructure. There itself you have removed one layer of the legacy technology there. So it's like a modern architecture. Basically, you're enhancing your architecture to use the emerging technologies and be competitive enough with in the field like of the logistics that we have.
Mm. So, and a bottleneck are the integration layer slows everything above it, no matter how modern the rest of the
Yes.
stack is. So, when I speak with leaders about modernization conversations, usually turns into a comparison of budgets, and but the hidden cost is almost never the software. It is the slow accumulation of the effort, exceptions, delays, and workarounds that build up over a time. So let's make this practical. What does the next 3 years really look like if a company continues maintaining a legacy EDI setup instead of migrating?
Yeah, so the cost actually keeps compounding quietly. I mean, there may not be much visible, but actually at the back end, it keeps compounding more and more, right? And then if there's a legacy systems, as business grows, right, on the other side, you have these new partners coming in, and then each partner could have a new set of rules, checks, and exceptions, right? And these legacy systems don't really evolve along with that growth, right? And each addition actually makes the whole setup a little heavier. It weighs down on the legacy system. So as years go by, what you're actually doing is maintaining a system. Okay, just like doing some patchwork here and there and just maintaining it, right? Rather than having a very robust, foolproof communication system, it's just an ecosystem of patches that you're maintaining. So yeah, though it may not be directly visible, the costs are compounding quietly.
Ashwin, your thoughts?
To me, the cost of these maintaining the system never shows up. Like just not the cost of the product, the cost of the software. I'm talking of the cost of the resource, how much resource was spent on this to maintain this legacy system. It's invisible. It's not visible to any layer other than the person who's doing on it. So this could delay. This could be like the project could be automated. This could be delayed. Now we need to find a innovative way to find the errors, find the way to fix these errors instead of manually somebody sitting here. Like for a business like us, it's a 24/7. I cannot have a person sitting there 24/7 maintaining this and saying that, okay, everything is good. So that will slow down. Like, and those are the lost hours. And then it bears down the whole bottom line to the cost incurred by the company. And they will realize only after you have after you cross that bridge, and how many slowdowns did occur, how many hours were spent on these, or the analysis is done after it was being worked on rather than before. What can be done to avoid that lost hours?
So the real 3 year cost isn't just financial, it's the momentum the business quietly loses while trying to keep an aging system alive. So I hear this concern often in supply chain ecosystems. Companies worry not only about their own readiness, but about being left behind by partners who modernize faster. Because when one part of the chain speeds up, everyone else feels that pressure. What actually happens when your partner moves to AS4 and you haven't made that shift yet? Ashwin?
Um, to us, like you become the bottleneck to your customers or to your internal business if you are not up to the speed with the technology. So you become the point of like a friction. You partner who wants like more visibility, more like an onboarding faster, and everyone now we are in the era where it is a data driven. Did I get the data? Did I get the message? So everyone wants to have like a visibility. I want to see it. Like I want to. I nobody wants to see a technical MDN from an EDI person sending it to him, and that's unreadable, right? So they want to view it. So it's like all we want to see is whether my transaction is being transported successfully, whether the business partner where do we have it's whether they're able to see the transaction. So it's like more on a visibility. If you're on a legacy, you're going to slow down. You're going to add more extra layers to do the work. As I said, like now I need to have an extra layer to add the visibility to that message. If I do not have AS4, but we will reach a point where the partner says we cannot continue without the AS4 with you. So we don't want to reach that level that the partner is forcing. We need to be ahead of time. We need to be more vigilant and be ready for that upgrade.
And Raj?
Yeah, so exactly as what Ashwin was saying, right? So partners, they make their own decisions to upgrade their technological landscape, and they do not announce it right after. I mean, they have to at some point, but after they do that upgrade, right? And then as a partner that is sending file to them, if we are not ready, they might treat us as a high maintenance connection, right? So they might, not involve us in some of their pilot opportunities, and then collaboration could also slow down. And like if there is any technological new initiatives at their end, they might think that we are not ready to do it, so they might not involve us. Okay, so these kind of negatives will also impact the customer satisfaction. So it is always good to be ready than be pushed to be ready.
So falling behind isn't just about capability. It changes how partner perceive your maturity and reliability, even if your team is working incredibly hard behind the scenes. One thing that has changed dramatically over the last few years is how interconnected risk has become. A breach in one part of the supply chain can spread faster than we would like to admit, and many organizations only realize their exposure once they are already reacting. So let's dig into this. If a partner gets breached, what does that mean for an organization still relying on legacy transport?
Yeah, so if a partner of mine is using a legacy transport system, and they have their security is breached, right? So it also exposes my system, right? So that's a serious limitation with legacy systems, too with the AS2, right? So your data effectively inherits the partner's vulnerability, okay? Because there's nothing in the protocol that independently validates or protects the message once you send it out, once it's out of your system. So if a partner system is compromised, yeah, you're also in a way compromised. So it's good to have a system, that prevents that. I mean, that shields you from that kind of an external threat.
And that different trusting the system versus having a double check everything by hand can completely change how quickly you recover from an incident. And this brings us to a situation many teams worry about, sometimes quietly. A major customer updates their standards, announces AS4 adoption, and sets a firm timeline. What determines whether you can respond smoothly or whether you end up in emergency mode? Ashwin?
Um, it depends on the policy within the company. It depends on the policies. When I say policies, this is regarding the security policies that are already aligned within your company, within the partner. So it's that becomes like more and like a structured process. So you need to have how are you going to handle the certificate? That's like a different strategies, right? But what what would happen is if your legacy system continues to evolve, like continues to be a part of your organization, then you're carrying like a technical debt, like even like a smallest of the issue that I'll go back repeating to what we had today. Even that the smallest of that request becomes overwhelming because it is impacting business. If we were not able to send the transaction, the truck was not moving because they do not know where the freight is, where to pick it up, right? So that timeline has not changed. So you need to adapt to that. And the way you would prepare yourself to be going forward is like you need you need to be compliable for AS4. You need to be ready. You need to be prepared for that that whole adoption to be enhanced. And I mean, you need to be ready for that adoption to be bring it into reality, basically.
Okay. So Raj, your stand on that.
Yeah, so when we are forced, to upgrade, so what happens is that organization will have to scramble to do the upgrade, and to meet the deadline, they might take some shortcuts, and yeah, shortcuts might, get you through the certification, but what happens is that you're actually postponing the problems to the production environment later. So you could end up with an unstable production environment. So we wouldn't want that. So it's key that we upgrade and move to more sophisticated system ahead of time before the mandate even arrives.
So readiness isn't measured by how fast you move under pressure. It's measured by how little pressure you create for yourself when requirement shows up. So whenever we talk about modernization at the leadership level, the question ultimately becomes, how will we know this was the right move? So not from a technical perspective, but in a terms of business impact. So from what you have seen, what are the outcomes that really help leadership feel confident about the investment?
So as Ashwin was mentioning about, right? So one of the first thing is that there's a lot of noise, right? If there is an issue, there's a lot of noise. So it could be a simple technical issue, but still the impact on business is huge, right? So leaders will not fully comprehend the technical details, but for them, business matters, right? So there's so much noise in the organization back and forth. So all these could be avoided if you have a very sophisticated system as such as the AS4 system, right? So and then you have this time to focus on other things like continuous improvement and other projects. So it's usually beneficial to have these modern systems. So it could be subtle at first, but quickly we have the teams will have more breathing room. They can focus on improvements and take up other projects.
Ashwin?
To me, the onboarding moves faster, and then once that onboarding moves faster, when the business starts moving, that's where it brings the visibility to the leadership within the organization. So there's less back and forth testing, and uh, the the bottom line is one is a successful communication, other one is exceptions. So if you are able to handle both, then you are going to make people happy, and as long as the leadership and the organizations are happy, then everything goes smoother.
So, in a way, the value shows up when everything gets quieter and smoother, not louder. So, leadership often
Yeah.
recognizes success when the operational background noise finally fades. Um, we have talked about outcomes. Now, let's talk about the engine behind those outcomes. AS4 is not valuable because it is new. It is valuable because it solves the exact protocol failures of AS2 cannot fix, no matter how much you patch it. So let's break down the AS4 actually eliminates in the real world. Ashwin?
So going back to one of the points that I made before, in the AS2 you have a way to communicate with the secured protocol and without, or in a normal protocol. So you have different ways of communicating that. So what AS4 brings is a standardized secured message transport, like it gives you more visibility to that. So what it does, it removes the inconsistencies within the data transmission within the organization. So it's always like a same layer of communication. It it's all like a the discrepancies or the interdependencies on that.
And Raj?
Yeah, so message integrity, right, and non-repudiation are where AS2 really separates itself from AS2. It's like the standout features of AS4, right? So let's say with the legacy protocol or AS2, if a partner claims they never received a file that we uh, transmitted, or they say that it has been altered, right? So as a sender, you are now trying to prove your innocence with the logs and chain of events and different screenshots, right? So most of the time it is just guesswork. It's not irrefutable evidence, okay? And guesswork can really be costly. I mean, it could lead to, some false truths there, okay? And so I can recollect an example where a particular customer had to defend themselves in an audit for several days because the AS2 transmission had no proof of delivery. Okay, if we had if they have had a AS4 receipts, right? So the discussion would have been closed in less than a minute because we have this irrefutable evidence, proof of arrival. Okay, and also like a chain of events. Actually, what happened at this time? This happened. This happened. So there's no finger pointing. There's no debate. It's just the ultimate truth. So that's where AS4 really stands out.
Ashwin, would you like to add more on this?
Um, yeah, I mean, we work for a logistics organization, so um, we are in a very competitive market. So we need to reduce our onboarding time or market or sell ourselves saying that we can onboard within X number of days or not X number of weeks. So that makes us stand out from the others. So the AS2 onboarding drags this process like longer. So what makes AS4 is like it's more predictable. We know it can be done in X number of days always. So we can stick to that plan.
So when we look at these examples together, pattern is obvious. AS4 gives you clarity instead of ambiguity, evidence instead of debate, consistency instead of guesswork, and the architecture that grows with your business instead of holding it back. That is why AS4 is not just a protocol upgrade, and it becomes the foundation for how you scale. So we have covered a lot. So let's bring those pieces together in a way that helps everyone see the full picture of why AS4 has become such a meaningful shift. Raj, would you be could you take us through the business and strategic drivers fast? Then Ashwin can walk us through what changes operationally.
Okay. So the drivers are quite clear, right? As you can see on the slide. So security uplift. Okay. Security is no longer an option. It's the very basic thing that you need to do. And AS4 really reduces the supply chain breach exposure, not just by design, but by policy, right? So, and then coming to compliance alignment. So when you're operating in a specific industry, right? So there are regulators, they come up with these different regulations. So your system should be ready for that, right? So even before the regulations come into effect, if you are upgrading ahead of time, you're ready, you're compliant already. And there is this matter of faster onboarding, partner onboarding, which boosts your customers' confidence level in you, and which could potentially earn you more business, more repeat business, right? And higher visibility and reliability is also another area where AS4 really stands out, right? So it's not just visibility for the technical folks in the team, it's not also for the business users in a very plain, simple and plain language about what happened to the transmitted business transaction, right? And you can always rely on it. So there's very little downtime, and you can be sure the file has been transmitted with the feature-rich, receipts that are. And also AS4 actually is sort of based on WS security, that web services, right? So as you hear more and more about these cloud-based applications, and also API is emerging as a large area where messages are exchanged between companies. So in this new modern environment, AS4 fits in very perfectly. Um, and yeah, so with a very robust modern system, so it's going to save a lot of money in terms of operations costs, right? So it's overall good for the organization's bottom line. And another thing is, so if you're operating, in an environment where there's multiple vendors and customers, regulators, so there's also this influential customers that sort of, uh, pressure you into adopting modern technologies, right? So businesses is always keen to get it done. So at technology people, it's responsible, right? It's our responsibility to make sure that the system is upgraded and ready, right, for more business. So as partners modernizing, customers are modernizing, we are also supposed to modernize, right? So that we are ready, we are technology ready.
So, Ashwin, about operational outcomes.
As I mentioned on the previous one, the onboarding becomes faster. You have less ambiguity, and you are able to identify your exceptions upfront rather than waiting for somebody to report that there was an issue. So the whole migration, like a maturity, becomes like a big outcome where um, it forces like a better discipline between the businesses. It becomes more measurable, and that gives us a competitive advantage.
So, when you look at both sides together, the picture is complete. AS4 is not just a protocol upgrade, it is a strategic decision that reduces risk at the top and removes noise on the ground. That combination is exactly why so many organizations are making the move now, not later. So, thank you again for spending your time with us today. As we move into the Q&A session, feel free to drop your questions in and we are happy to take them. Yeah. Oh, yeah, already seeing few questions. So let's bring some of those into the conversation and while you add yours. So how do you handle a phased AS4 migration without disrupting live shipment flows? Ashwin?
Um, as as we have been talking about, like it gives an early warning for an exception. If something breaks, you will know within within minutes or seconds, not hours or days. So that mitigates uh, the error resolution, or at least it gives a visibility to your errors, what's happening. So we cannot have like a parallel traffic, meaning I am sending a data, and after they receive the data, then you would receive this. This is going to happen simultaneously. That gives the more visibility to the whole business, to me.
Raj, would you
Okay,
like to add?
the question is about phased AS4 migration, right? Yeah. So in such a scenario, right? So if you are already having AS2 set up and running, right? So you could have a parallel AS4 system set up, and then you can choose some of the low risk flows first, and then test them with a partner, right, through this parallel AS4 system, and then switch to AS4. So this could be a very nice phased approach of migrating AS2 partners or even other legacy partners onto AS4 rather than just doing everyone together.
Yeah, okay. Moving on. So does AS4 handle peak season spikes better?
Yes, for an industry like us, that's going to be most beneficial. The reason being, it's a concurrency messages, and the volume of messages that we transmit through the partners. So it throws more work towards it it add more firepower that I can say, more towards that messaging, and AS4 adds more work towards the um, to the uh, to the legacy visibility. Exactly the example that I shared with you today, we had to spend hours to find out what the issue was, and then we had to put people to resolve that. So that's the bottom line where AS4 will help us.
Raj?
Yeah, so peak season, right? It is the one that exposes weak systems, right? So it's also good lessons learned. So in practice, what we have seen is that while AS2 struggles to handle peak season data, right? So AS4 actually scales. So there has been like very few slowdowns or retries or even complaints from the partners. So wherever AS2 is struggling right now, actually A4 performs much better.
8. So, next one. How does AS4 strengthen audit trials compared to AS2?
Yeah, so I think we talked about it in the standard features of AS4. So it's quite metadata rich, right? So it's got all the information. It's got the chain of events. It's always verified, signed, and also timestamped. The receipt are received from the partner. So these are like irrefutable evidences, and then you can have these submitted to the auditors, right? But whereas what happens with the AS2 is that mostly you're left with these ambiguous logs and screenshots, and then it's like a guesswork depending on who the person is troubleshooting, who the person that is troubleshooting. So rather than providing irrefutable evidence, there you always have to defend your system. But here AS4, uh, it's uh, it's irrefutable claim when you provide a AS4 receipt.
So, thank you, Raj. Actually, we are running out of time. So, please add your questions to the chat, and we can email them to uh, those who ask those questions. So, thank you again for being part of this conversation. If you like to support assessing your AS4 readiness or planning next steps, we are always happy to help. Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Harini.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.